Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University.
Bang! Samaje Christian, 3.
Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Triple Double Podcast brought to you by Triple Double Prospects. My name's Corey Albertson. We've also got 270 Hoops Jason Morrow in the studio today as our producer, and we've got a very special guest, the reigning Division I state champions of Ohio, Cincinnati Moeller Crusaders, their head coach, Carl Kremer. Coach Kremer, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Corey. I'm really I'm honored to be on your podcast and looking forward to it.
That sounds great. We appreciate you coming on. So a quick rundown of Coach Kremer. He's been the coach at Moeller since 1989. In that time, he's won over 500 varsity basketball games, over 20 Greater Catholic League titles, made 7 trips to the Ohio Division I state tournament, and also won 4 Division I state championships, including the 2017-2018 state championship. So, Coach, you guys have established yourself as one of the premier programs in Ohio and the Midwest. And, you know, in a nutshell, how'd you guys do that?
You know, Corey, it's really a long story. You know, it's taken a lot of time, and I appreciate you saying that. You know, it didn't happen overnight. Moeller wasn't, you know, in those early years, Moeller did not have a great basketball tradition. And when we started, actually, it was in January 1990. When we started, Corey, we, you know, one thing we hoped to do was to build some basketball culture in the school. And slowly over that decade, we started to do it. We started to win a few league titles. And by the end of that decade, 99, we broke through and won a state title. And I think that changed things a little bit in our community. And, you know, slowly we picked up people and largely, you know, just great assistant coaches over the years. And, you know, we didn't have this huge coaching staff that we have now in the beginning. It just kind of grew. And then I think it attracted better players. I think in the early days of Moeller, you know, we didn't attract the basketball families, but I think now families that are looking for a great school academically and also one that can provide a great basketball career for a kid, we've attracted those people to us. And so it's it's grown and great people. And so I've been very fortunate.
Right. And one of the things, you know, I think there's people from all over Ohio and hopefully even from further than that listening to this podcast. And, you know, people in Cincinnati know, people in maybe Cleveland know, Dayton, and much less so in Columbus. But the Catholic school sports is such a big deal in a city like Cincinnati or Cleveland. And in Cincinnati, there's so much competition with, you know, your league, with St. Xavier, with Elder, with LaSalle, with on a smaller level to Roger Bacon, Purcell, Marion. And, you know, it's fun for me to go out and watch those programs because there's such a family atmosphere to it. Guys who've known each other, have played against each other, you know, since they were in the 2nd or 3rd grade. And, you know, that's got to be one of the fun things about it. When just, you know, when you see Moeller play LaSalle, you know, it's a fun game, but even before the game, you know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, It really has been a blessing playing in this league. It's a great league. You're going to be in for a blood fight every Friday night. And you're right, the kids do know each other. They're playing in these small little Catholic grade schools growing up, and they've competed since they were little kids. And the rivalry is, you know, I'm not from Cincinnati. And when I arrived here in the mid-'80s, I remember calling home to my dad and saying, Daddy, man, there's some intensity in this thing. I used to laugh about the hatred in the league, but in a good way, Corey. And I think it has been great. I don't think we've had the talent in our league the last 10 years, maybe the way we had it prior. But I still think it's a great league to play in.
Sure, it's a great league to play in, and the results speak for themselves. And when you look into district tournaments, then the regional tournaments and the state tournaments. And I understand, I think it's like that on the girls' side as well with the Girls Greater Catholic League. You know, those are the teams that win. And, you know, the reason we wanted you on the podcast, and like I told you when we talked the other day, was we really want to talk about culture. The idea of this podcast is to talk about different things in basketball. We've had different high school coaches talk about different topics, but the thing that stands out to Moeller for me is always the culture. And considering how many games you guys have won in your many, many years of coaching there, I was talking to John Stovall from Nike and ESPN maybe a year ago, and he made a point to me. He said, Corey, with all the great guys that Moeller's had that have gone on to Division I schools and won state championships, they've had, and I don't think he could even name one, 1,000-point scores. So you guys have really built up a culture that's about team. I know you've got some mottos, some principles and everything. So just talk about the culture and the expectation for a student athlete that, wants to be a part of the Moeller basketball family.
Yeah, Corey, I appreciate you bringing it up. I will tell you that the longer I've coached, and I don't know, I became an old guy pretty fast. I all of a sudden I'm old. I don't feel that way, but I become more and more convinced, Corey, that culture is, for a high school basketball program to be successful, culture is more important than anything else. And I tell that to young guys who are building their program, just you can't sacrifice on what you believe in and what you get your community to believe in, you get the players to believe in, and you have to have that. And for us, I'll tell you, in the very beginning, we actually committed to 4 core values. And it sounds kind of silly and kind of, it's harder than that, but we've really been true to these 4 values: arete, which is just about work ethic and being your best in everything you do every day, answering the bell every day, team attitude, and being first class. It's about our character and how we treat people and how we approach the game, and then finally toughness. And we are, we're having camp right now. We got 220 kids in our camp, and that's what we're preaching to them. And we will preach it all week long. And I think it makes a difference. And I think it also allows those adults that want to be a part of our program. As you know, Corey, we have so many great guys that just volunteer. They don't take a penny. They just want to be around the program and around kids that are trying to do it the right way. And so it builds that culture, and I think it's put us in a position where we're pretty competitive every year. And when we get those years, Corey, when we have really, really good players, we have a chance to win it all. But even in other years, because of our culture, I think we're always going to be in the hunt and be a tough out at the end of the year.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing. This year we looked at you guys and you had a couple elite athletes who are going to big Division I schools. And, those guys are going to be good players no matter where they play high school basketball at. Maybe they fit in a little better at Moeller. Some people might feel the other way. But what, really kind of sealed the deal for you this year and then in previous years past where I've seen you guys be good is you're going to have those couple kids who are, I always just kind of call them Moeller kids when I send out my report to college coaches, which are just those kids that aren't super talented. They're always seniors. They've waited their time, and they're really culture kids. And, my question to you would be, having been to your practices over the years, obviously seen a million games, but, you learn so much more at the practices. And I've seen it so broken down at Moeller where you've got different coaches handling different aspects, but the culture aspect of it, it seems like the kids learn when they come in, and as they mature, the seniors are the ones preaching culture, possibly even more so than the coaching staff. Is that somewhat accurate?
Well, if we're doing it right, that's the way it is, Corey. And when you get that, when those freshmen come in, when a 14-year-old walks into a basketball program, he's looking up to those older kids. I mean, and when those kids are convinced that, hey, this is how we do it here. And, I love the point you made before. We haven't had a bunch of 1,000-point scores. And I know when we've had kids and families call us up, Corey, and they'll come and talk and say, we really want to come to Moeller. And in the end, they'll say, hey, I want my kid to play JV earlier. I want to make sure he scores a lot of points so he'll be recruited. And as Corey, how much they score in high school has nothing to do with who's going to recruit them. But, a kid's got to be willing to come to Moeller and be a part of a team instead of having a team centered around him. And when we've lost some good guys, some really good players, but we think that's okay because the guys that come to Moeller want it to be team first. Our players want it that way. And, we get families like the Davenport and the Hayeses that recognize long-term that's what's best for their kid. And they're going to be good college players because of it.
Right. The points thing is a tremendous point because you look at Jackson Hayes, who's going to Texas. Some people have put him in the national rankings for kids who are going to be freshmen in college next year. And his junior year at Moeller, he probably played less than 10 minutes in a game and didn't really score any points, and then had a tremendous senior year. And Jeremiah Davenport, a little bit of a similar situation. And we're seeing it now. There's a kid at Centerville, a big kid who's going through kind of a similar thing to what Jackson went through, and that's
right.
It speaks to sacrifice. It speaks to, you've obviously put a onus on patience, and you're getting these families to understand that there has to be patience, because if you take a kid like a Jeremiah let's take all three of the Davenports, Mike, Joshua, and Jeremiah. Yep. Any of them were good enough to be 1,000-point scorers. The reason they weren't 1,000-point scorers was two things. Number one, there was other talent around them, and number two, just the way you guys play basketball as a team. And it speaks to the families, but it speaks to the culture, and that you've created an environment where they're willing to accept that.
Michael didn't start for us until his senior year. He won a state championship his junior year, but he wasn't a starter until his senior year. He goes on to get a Division I scholarship. Jeremiah doesn't start until his senior year. Now, he was really good off the bench his junior year, but now Joshua, he was able to break through. He actually played a lot as a sophomore. He kind of got a little bit faster than the other two, but you're right. You got to give the Davenport family a lot of credit. I think that Darren Sheila understood what Moeller was about and what it was teaching their son way beyond just basketball. And they had the patience to trust in us. And, I think it's worked out for all three boys.
Right. And that speaks to one of the key topics I wanted to talk to you about is, again, in the with the theme being culture. One of the big pieces to that at the high school level versus the college or professional level is, these kids go home to mom and dad every night. So, today's parent, there's a lot of high school coaches, college coaches that complain about parents being over-involved, parents being critical, parents being quick to transfer if things don't necessarily go their way from the get-go. So I don't tend to hear those things very often from Moeller parents. I certainly know a lot of your families, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of it, but how do you maybe, handle that conversation when the kid first gets there, or just kind of guide people on the right path so that doesn't come into play in the winter when you're trying to focus on winning games?
Yeah, Corey, I do. I talk to a lot of coaches at other schools, and I'm blown away by the stuff that they have to handle and things that come at them from parents. And by and large, we don't have to deal with a lot of that. And probably did maybe a little bit earlier in the 90s. We had some of it, but I think because we've been able to establish success in our program, we just don't get a lot of it. I think this, Corey, I think the number one thing that's changed in coaching in all these years I've done it is it's really important that you communicate with the kids. And I have individual meetings with every kid in our program. I do it in the spring. I do some in the fall. And then with our varsity, as years going on, I try to have one-on-ones with guys all the time. And because I do think kids just want to know where they stand, and they want you to care about them, but they want you to be honest with them, man. And I think that's one thing we do pretty well. I'm pretty honest with kids where I see them, even in the college recruiting process. Corey, how unrealistic kids can be, and they don't really understand what's out there. And I try to just be upfront and honest with parents and communicate, and I think that solves a lot of those issues.
Sure. With you guys, and I think a lot of the Catholic schools, I shouldn't even say the Catholic schools. I think a lot of the great programs in Ohio are good at this, and you guys certainly, from my perspective, aren't in the habit of kicking a good kid, not a great player, but a really good kid, a really good team program kid out of the program because they're maybe not a great player. And, one thing you're going to see at Moeller, or, again, a lot of winning programs is you're going to see a bench. You guys have a long bench, and you got some kids who don't play a lot, but who are really bought into what Moeller basketball is. And, you see some of those kids go on and, decide to try to get into coaching or, irregardless, they're going to learn a lot of life lessons and whatnot. And, I know you guys certainly make it more than about talent, where if there's a kid who really wants to be a part of Moeller basketball, it doesn't seem like you guys are kicking them to the curb, even with all the talented players that come in every single year.
Yeah, and you know what? It's tough for a lot of kids because I will say kids come to Moeller and they have a dream of playing and they're able to make the team and be a part of it, but it's pretty hard to get on the floor. I mean, we've pretty consistently been in the top 10 programs in the state, top 10 teams every year. So to, be on the floor, you got to be a pretty outstanding player. So we've had guys who could go to their local public schools and really be standouts. And, we've had many kids over the years do that, transfer their junior year to go play. And I always have those kids back. I understand that. But we also have a lot of kids stay. And I think a lot of kids stay and just become great. We call them gold teamers. And our practices are starting rotation guys are blue, and then our guys that aren't playing are the gold team. And, you can go back 20 years and you'll find our graduates come in, they'll talk to our guys about gold team pride. And you're right, somehow our guys have really bought into everyone on the team matters. There's no one more important than anybody else. I think we've been able to sell that, and those guys have had a great time doing it. I'll tell you, even our managers. I mean, our managers are more like college managers than most high schools, and we typically have 5 to 6 to 7 managers, and almost all of them go on and do it in college. And I just think it's a good experience for kids. Kids love this game, and they want to find a way to be a part of it, and we've tried to provide that in the Selco program.
Absolutely. And, speaking to that in terms of, getting kids to Moeller, and, this isn't a podcast to talk about recruiting, so I'm just going to bring up one quick recruiting point. But, with a school like Moeller, the same can be said for a Kettering, Alter, and Dayton, a Toledo St. John's, a Cleveland St. Edwards, or St. Ignatius, is people love to talk about how you guys, go after kids and whatnot. And, I've been around your program. I know that you guys, stay within the rules of the OHSAA to a T, probably more so than most people do, coincidentally, even though people say the opposite. But, speak to the point where this far into it, having won state championships, having had kids go on to college, having that culture, it recruits itself in terms of the kids want to come to Moeller, probably more so than you even want the kid to come to Moeller.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of kids calling. I mean, even kids that are playing now, we get a lot of transfer kids that'll call. And I just try to be really brutally honest with people and try to lay out what it would be like and how many kids are already there, and be honest. And we have a lot of kids show up at our open house, and we're fortunate for that. The one thing that's been frustrating for me over the years, Corey, is when we started winning more, and I do think we were attracting kids. People started they recruit and they cheat, and we've never cheated once. It drives me crazy. A lot of the people that, Corey, all the illegal open gyms that go on all over. We try to do open gym right by the book. We only coach 10 days in the summer. We try to do all that stuff by the book. It's just important to us to do it that way. And, to have people accuse us of that over the years, it has been difficult. But in the end, you just do what's right, and hopefully your program sells itself. And, one thing I do believe in, Corey, is that families should have the right to send their kid wherever they want to. And so you got to be open to families that want to come in and look at Moeller, and then they've got to decide whether that fits their child or not.
Absolutely. And when we've had other high school coaches on the podcast, specifically Sonny Johnson of Garfield Heights and Ricardo Hill of Cincinnati Walnut Hills, and those are two guys who, even more so than yourself, people are always telling me these guys cheat, these guys go after kids.
Right.
And, we kind of addressed those topics with both of those guys, and I think they came up with similar answers. And again, it's about the results. And that's what I want to speak to, really. I know, you talk to college coaches all the time. People in Cincinnati know, people outside Cincinnati probably don't know Mike Sussley, one of your assistant coaches who's great with talking to college coaches, especially with the younger kids, helping them get on the map with college coaches and everything. And, one thing you guys have done at Moeller is for any senior who wants to play college basketball, whether that's a high major Division I spot like a Jackson Hayes going to Texas, or whether it's a Division III in-state school, you guys have found a way to help those kids get to college. So what is the strategy that Coach Sussley and you employ in dealing with college coaches and just going through the whole college recruiting process with families?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned Sus, because really, if you look at our success over the years, nobody has had more to do with Moeller High School's success than the passion of Mike Sussley. I get all the credit, Corey, and it's just because people don't know. I know you're aware of it. Sus is amazing. The one thing that we believe, he and I both, is that if a kid puts up with all of our garbage, because as you know, Corey, we ask a lot of our guys. We ask a ton. And, if you're willing to come in and be a part of this and buy into our culture, then you're like one of our kids, and we're going to do everything in our power to help you go to the next step. And we're going to be so proud when you're able to do it. He is a machine. That guy makes more phone calls in a day to colleges than any human being. I like to think that I do a decent job in working with colleges and presenting our guys, but Sus is the master. He just for our guys, he is calling. He is getting people involved with our guys. Our kids are getting ready to go out here in July. I promise you, Sus will be calling, and you know this, he'll call every college coach and tell them where our guys are going to be and really get it set up to give our kids the best opportunity to show themselves and then be successful. He just does an amazing job in that place.
Last July, Deuce McBride, one of your kids, played AAU with me, the Cincinnati Lakers, and I meet Sus in Louisville before our first game to say hi, and he's going to come watch our game. And I had with me, I'm trying to coach my team, and then I'm trying to do the scouting service thing as well, which became a much bigger endeavor than I ever imagined. But I had a really complicated scheduling grid where I'm going to try and coach this game. I'm going to go see these 4 games and circle between courts. And you guys had maybe 7 or 8 more kids playing in the tournament, and Sussley's schedule was more complicated than mine. And I don't think, he just keeps moving. After the game, he's telling me the complete stat line of not only Deuce, but an unofficial Moeller family kid. I had Joey Edmonds from Wyoming, whose father was on your coaching staff forever. I know you guys would have loved to have had him at Moeller, had his father not moved on to the Wyoming job, but.
He's working.
He's what?
I'm sorry. He's working our camp this week. I wish Joey was in a Moeller uniform. You're right. I've known him since he's a little kid, so he's part of our basketball family for sure.
Absolutely. Well, that really ties into what I want to talk about next, and that's really going into some of the basketball strategy of your team. And again, want to talk more about culture and strategy, but when I've been to Moeller practice, when I've seen you guys playing games, it's a little bit like a football thing, I think, in where you have a kind of a week to prepare for what that team does best. And what we really know about Moeller is you guys put a huge emphasis on preparation. And the most apparent that ever was a couple years ago, the season opener. You guys played Pickerington North, who had a really, really good team. The Jerome Hunter kid is going to be at Indiana next year. He's going to be a hell of a college player. And it was the very first game of the season, opening night. And you guys already had the full scout, knew all their sets, everything they want to do. And I was like, how did they do that when it's the first game of the year? But, just talk about preparation on the high school level. I mean, not only how does that help you win games, but then what lessons does it teach your kids?
Yeah, we're really big. We're really big into that. We believe in preparation. We spend we watch a little film every day, even in our preseason. We watch film of the practice before. We just believe you can overdo it. I know kids can only, maybe take 10 to 20 minutes really good of film, but we're just big believers in it. So when it comes time to play the game, we're really big on knowing your personnel. And again, I don't deserve any credit here. This is really, Suss is just maniacal in obtaining film and breaking it down. And, kind of our chief scheme guy, our guy, both, mainly on defense, but also offensively, is Danny Jerkowitz. And Danny played for us back in the late 90s and started coaching for us right away as soon as he's out of high school while he was in college. And he's just developed into, to be honest with you, Corey, he's the smartest basketball guy I know. He just has an incredible mind for the game. So you get Suss together, and then we get a veteran coach like Fred Hesse, who's always got great ideas. I think if we have some days to prepare, we're going to be ready to play, and I think that gives our guys some confidence.
It does, and then it goes both ways too, where you guys have the more time between games, the bigger advantage you have. Because, some of these big events you guys go to, or even when the Ohio State Final Four, I think this year you guys had more talent than the competition, but there have been years where you guys have gone up there and done well, where you haven't had as much talent as the competition, but you've been able to beat them off of preparation. And I mean, I think I've certainly learned in years, and this goes for LaSalle when Flem was there as well, Elder and X too, but you guys, there's some type of teams that aren't going to beat Moeller. And if you've got just one guy, and I know you guys have beaten teams with future NBA players, but they've only had one guy, and that's not going to beat you guys. Or a team that's really talented that runs up and down the floor but lacks discipline, that's not going to beat you guys. And, when you guys do lose games, you tend to lose the dog fights against the other really disciplined, really mentally tough teams, like if you battle at St. Ed's, it's always going to be a game, or, when you play in the league, when you play LaSalle. Right.
No, that's, we feel like our advantage can be, is, everyone says we play slow, Corey, and I it kind of drives me crazy because our guys would tell you, if we can get a great shot in the first 5 seconds, I want to get it. We push the ball every possession, every single possession. We try to push it up. But I'm just a believer in the game comes down. It's not that complicated. It comes down to who gets the best quality shots. So if we can get that quality shot in the first 5 seconds, I believe the next 15 or 20 seconds is where the defense, once it gets set, is going to be at its best. Now I want to move it around a little bit and weaken the defense with ball movement. And so I don't think we play slow, but I do think our kids are disciplined to take quality shots, and then our defense is disciplined enough not to give up easy shots. And I think the game just gets down to that simple equation.
Right. The game slows down a lot. What people who aren't really in basketball full-time don't understand is one of the big things that slows the game down in a Moeller game is not Moeller's offense, it's Moeller's defense. And the guys who are used to getting their first, second, or maybe their third option in a set that they run, now they're not getting it, so they pull the ball out and try and run something again. That's what often slows the ball down. And, offensively this year, you guys might have been slower than you have in the past because you had one really good player injured. You didn't have as good of a shooting team as you've had in the past, but, you had some athletes. So, there was some ugly basketball at the beginning of the year. But, at the end of the day, you're in the business of winning basketball games. And, the shot clock topic is a whole other topic. But the thing about Moeller that everybody who's been in scouting or media or whatever for years knows is that if you guys get the lead late in the game, midway through the fourth quarter, if you guys are up by 6 points, it is going to be tough to beat you. I can think of one time, I'm sure you're going to know where I'm going right away. It was a regional final. Didn't go your guys' way, but that's the only time, and I've probably been to close to 100 more games that I can ever remember you guys kind of blowing a lead. And I tell the story all the time of we were playing AAU last summer in July in Indianapolis, and we were up by, let's say, 6 with like 3 minutes to go. We just hit a shot to go up 6. We get a defensive rebound, and one of our guards is trying to push the ball down the court, and I scream at Joey. I always scream at Joey if he didn't get the ball. I said, "Joey, you're 5'8". You better be the point guard, buddy." So I look at Joey, and Joey looks at me, and Deuce is on the court. I just say Moeller. And Joey kind of looks at me and nods, and he goes, I know what you're talking about. And they just kind of go into that Moeller triangle weave that you guys go to. And, that's really the discipline I see with you guys is, closing out games. When you're dealing with teenagers is so tough, and your kids seem to understand that.
It is a process. It's something you have to work on, but I appreciate you saying. I think it is a way you win big games. You have to understand time to score, and guys have to be playing for the team and not just their own stats. And probably goes back to that culture thing you spoke of earlier. So, it's important. Now, I surprise people when I tell them this, Corey. I'm not against the shot clock at all. In fact, I think a shot clock. I understand why a lot of schools don't want it. I think they're afraid of the administration end of it. And I get that to some degree. It actually is kind of hard to do, is to run a shot clock. But I'd like to see it. I actually think it would help us, would help our defense. You're right. If you looked at our team last year, people just held the ball on us. I think it'd make the game a little more interesting.
Sure, and it benefits you guys because, offensively, there's an adjustment process, but defensively, now instead of running a second set against you guys have to throw up bad shots at the end of possessions.
Yes.
So it's a benefit to you guys.
Yeah, we would like it, and I've always said I'm for it. I get a little bit why there are a lot of schools that don't want it, but I think it'd be good for the high school game. I just love the whole strategy of it. I love watching the pros and teams that, your Warriors are going to try to get the 2-for-1 every time. I watch the Cavs, and a lot of times they blow opportunities, I think, to get 2-for-1 possessions. That'd be fun to teach on the high school level, I think.
Sure. Now let's talk about that. Again, you said people criticize your approach. It's a deliberate approach, obviously, but people criticize it and say it's boring. I've heard the opposing student section chant boring about 1 million times, and at LaSalle used to do that too when they would go a little slower. But I've heard, and there's a lot of criticism, some warranted, some not, on AAU coaches. And I was telling somebody in a former podcast that there's an AAU coach that came to me and said, well, I got this Moeller kid. He's going to play for me this spring, and he's really, really good player. He's really athletic, but he didn't play a ton at Moeller. And I said, okay, well, what do you think this spring? Is he going to kind of burst onto the recruiting scene? And he goes, yeah, well, first I just got to get some of that Moeller out of him. And, my response to that is, I guess you don't like guys that win. And, whether you love or hate Moeller, the results are what they are. And, when I say that to say this, when I talk to college coaches, I think they look at it two ways. They say, when I go see Moeller play as a college coach watching a high school kid, it is somewhat of a tough evaluation sometimes because the basketball is so structured. When you see a high school game, you usually get to see a little less structure, and you can see kind of the creativity of a kid maybe. But on the other side, if I'm a college coach and I'm recruiting a Moeller kid, I already know that they check a few boxes, and those boxes are that they've been coached, they're willing to accept coaching, and they're willing to accept discipline in their lives. They understand the preparation, they understand the year-round commitment. And to me, that outweighs some of the maybe pros of a freelance basketball system.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually had college coaches tell me the exact same thing. So I'm with you on that, Corey. I know that guys like recruiting out of our program for the fact that they know they've been coached pretty hard, and they're not going to be as behind, I think, going into knowing what it takes to really work at a high level. So yeah, I accept that. I think that's a fair analysis.
And then in the last 2 years specifically, what would this be? 16, 17. You guys were undefeated. Go to the state championship game. Lose that game by 1. You had a really good team, and that was a really skilled basketball team with a lot of guys who knew how to play. This year, 2017, 2018, you guys win the state championship. Kids like Jackson Hayes and Jeremiah Davenport and then Deuce McBride when he got healthy towards the end a little bit. It was somewhat of a skilled team, but it was more of guys with a lot of athleticism and a lot of heart. And are you starting to transition? I mean, how do you build your team now when you have a team like that that's more athleticism based? And the number one thing I noticed is, although there was one detriment, which is that you guys were not a very good shooting team this year, you guys are sure as hell tough to score on when you've got your defensive principles with kids with athleticism like Davenport and Hayes.
Yeah, again, Danny Jerkowitz just does an incredible job with our defense. And when you had Jackson Hayes on the back end changing shots, we were pretty tough to score against. The one thing about us, Corey, is I know some guys, and they win doing this, so there's no one way to do it, but they've got their system, and the kids that go into their program are going to play into their system. I know Bob Krasanik years ago told me, if I get a big, slow guy, I'm just going to be, can't play here. And he needs to go somewhere else. They press and run. And, we've been a little different in our approach. We kind of look at what we have every year. We don't do, in the summer, we put our offense in a whole lot. We may run a couple things, but by and large, I want to just see the kids play and get an idea as to what we can do. And really, we run something pretty different almost every year, what we think fits that particular team. And certainly last year's team, our best offense was Jeremiah getting a defensive rebound and trying to get out of his way and letting him go. He could really create, and we just had guys who could get it to the rim. That year before, though, was a team that really understood how to move the basketball. And with Keegan McDowell, we had some shooters, and so it was a really different team. Riley Voss was such a great passer from the big man spot. So we try to change and figure out what each team can do. And we've lost a lot of guys, as you know, Corey, but we're going to be pretty good again next year, I think. And I think we're going to shoot the ball pretty well, and it's going to be a different team, but I think we have a chance to be pretty good.
I think it'll be really good. I think there's a couple kids who are going to be juniors next year. They're going to be good players. And, you brought up one of the interesting things in high school. In the pros, you can go get guys that fit your system. In college, you recruit only kids that fit your system of basketball.
Exactly.
High school, you got to work with what you've got. And I'm a big, big believer in this. And then I'm going to say that you are one of only about 2 or 3 programs in Greater Cincinnati that I think shouldn't follow it. I'm a big believer in most, especially public schools, smaller schools. If you've got 1 or 2 good kids, they need to be the ones shooting the basketball. The difference is with Moeller, with I think Cincinnati Taft is another one, Dayton Dunbar, Trotwood Madison, some of these teams that tend to get a lot of talent. You guys are tough to beat because you tend to have 5 guys that can score. And in a high school game, if you got 5 guys that can score, you're going to be a tough team to beat. But it's right. Interesting. You do have, as a high school coach, you have to be adjusting every year, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's what's kind of fun about it. We've had big teams, we've had some smaller teams, just the different styles, and you have to. I just think coaches have to bend to their player skills more than the players have to bend to what coaches like to do, and so we've always varied a little bit, and I think that's kind of the fun of coaching.
Great. Well, let's recap here real quick. I'm going to ask you one last question here before we wrap up, which is this. We've covered a few topics here, but the theme of this podcast was always to talk about culture. So I think you brushed on this a little bit, but if you're talking to a high school coach, a young guy, say in his probably mid to late 20s, and they're getting that first varsity job, and that first varsity job is probably going to be at a school that's had a rough go of it on the basketball court in the last decade or so. What is your advice on, some of the first steps to really build that culture to hopefully one day create a program such as yourself or some of the other great ones in the Midwest?
Corey, my first full year at Moeller, we were 6-15, and I always tell guys when they're starting jobs, and I just say, don't worry about your record. Particularly in that first year, don't worry about your record. Worry about building the culture. Get it to where it should be. Don't bend on that. build relationships with your kids, build relationships with the families in your program, but don't bend on your culture. And I truly believe that. And then I say, and then as you go along the road, find good people. It won't happen overnight. It's not like you can't go out and get the coaching staff we're blessed to have. I didn't have that in the first several years. You just pick up guys as you move down the road. And I just try to tell young coaches it is about people. You know, you're not going to do it all by yourself. You got to get a lot of people to buy into the vision. And if you can get people to do that and you keep adding that on, that'll just grow. It just manufactures itself and gets bigger and bigger. And I think that's how you build a high school program. It's about doing little things right. And again, in Moeller, we're blessed. We're on the end of town that, you know, we're able to attract a lot of kids. And once we kind of broke through and became a basketball school, I know we're just in a good location, cross county highway and everything, that we were able to attract basketball families. But I think you do that by deciding what you believe in and not compromising on those things. And you got to care about kids. You got to care about it. It can't just be about you. You got to, the kids that play in your program have to truly know. Of course, that's one thing that, even in what you're doing, that's why I was happy when Deuce played for you. You certainly get the air that, or I get the idea when I talk to you, you care about the kids that you deal with. And I think if you start there, and then put some discipline into it, so some great things can happen.
Well, that's great. That's tremendous advice, and hopefully some young coaches are listening to that. And you know, I'll tell you, in wrapping up here, if you're listening to this podcast, whether you're a college coach, you want to be a high school coach, if you're a player, if you're a parent, I really recommend strongly taking your kid out to see in Cincinnati or Dayton a Greater Catholic League basketball game, because you're going to get a different experience than what you've seen in different places, and you're going to see a lot of heart, you're going to see a lot of rivalry, and it's fun, but you're also going to see a really disciplined approach and, you know, a great way for kids to turn into young men. And I've seen kids go to Moeller who are kids you expect to go to Moeller, and I've seen kids who are maybe a little bit rough around the edges go to Moeller. One of my favorite kids I've ever been around, I didn't really coach his AU team. I coached a grade below, but I was around his team with the Queen City Prophets, was Charlie Byers. And Charlie, I'm sure, was one of the most hard-headed kids you ever had to deal with. But, you know, I saw with just being at Moeller how much that kid matured into just being an unbelievably resilient human being and just fighting until eventually it was his turn to play on the Division I college level. And I couldn't be more proud of Chuck for what he did.
No, I'm with you. Charlie Byers is one of my favorite all-time players. The heart that kid played with, and our coaches loved him. And and that's one neat thing about Moeller. We get a diversity of kids, and I think that makes coaching fun to see different kind of kids really become brothers and want to fight the battle together. And that's what it is. It's really cool. Nobody was better than Charlie.
Well, that's great. That's great. Let's just in case anybody hasn't been listening to, Coach Kremer talk about all the games he's won. Let's run through these accolades one more time. Today's guest was Carl Kremer, head coach at Cincinnati Moeller since right around the time I was born. He started coaching in 1989-1990. In that time, Coach Kremer has won over 500 varsity games, over 20 Greater Catholic League titles, made 7 trips to the Ohio Division I state tournament, and won 4 Division I state championships. Coach Kremer, thank you so much for joining us.
Corey, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate all you do for basketball in Cincinnati.
Thank you, sir. Well, that was the Triple Double Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Corey Albertson. For Jason Moore, our producer, thanks for listening.